Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here to share with you how I approach mixing clean vocals within a dense, heavy mix. Now, I've been looking forward to making this video for a while because the one thing I see online is people overcomplicating mixing vocals, and more specifically, mixing melodic vocals or clean vocals. Now, what I like to do is I like to practice something called the 80-20 rule. Now, just in case you've never heard of the 80-20 principle, here's what it is. The rule states that 80% of your results actually come from only 20% of your actions. Now, this rule can be applied to all different things in life, but I really like to focus in on it when it comes time to mix, and more specifically when it comes time to mixing vocals. And we all tend to overcomplicate vocals. It's natural because vocals really are what the listener is listening to most, but mixing them really does not have to be all that complicated if you focus on the right things. So I have an audio sample here with some melodic vocals within a heavy mix. I'm gonna play the sample and I'm gonna break down step by step exactly how I achieved the vocal sound that you'll hear in the following production. Let's check it out. Okay, so that sample was by my good friends in a band called Poeta. They are a super talented band. We just wrapped up 2 songs, and this is one of the 2. And I will leave a link to their music within the video's description. Okay, so as I was previously mentioning, I like to focus in on this rule called the 80-20 rule, where again, 80% of my mix results come from 20% of my mix tweaks. Now, in the case of melodic vocals, this 20% where you're really gonna get the most bang for your buck, fall into 3 categories in my opinion. Super simple. Solid compression moves, proper EQing, and the creative use of ambient effects. That's it. When it comes to things like overcomplicated automation, swapping out plugins, endlessly trying all different compressors, all different EQs, overcomplicating routing. Now, in my opinion, all of these tweaks really fall into the 80% that actually only really give you 20% of your results if you're lucky. So I like to focus most of my time on the 20% that give me the real results. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like in practice. Okay, so let's look at the vocal tracks that we have going on in the session. We have a verse vocal, chorus vocal double, chorus harmony, and a verse harmony, and some background woes, a gang vocal, and our vocal submix. Now, when it comes to metal and screaming, I don't like to submix my vocals because I find that it kind of overcomplicates things. I end up over-processing my scream vocals. For me, it's the opposite with melodic vocals. I just find that submixing them makes things easier in the long run, but it's just personal preference. But anyway, with that being said, let's break down what's happening in terms of processing here. So as I previously mentioned, solid compression, solid EQ, and ambient effects really are gonna make the biggest difference when it comes to mixing really professional sounding melodic vocals. And I'm gonna show you what each process is doing to the resulting vocal mix. So let's check this out. So I'm gonna just bypass all of my inserts and all of my ambient effects that are happening on the vocal. And let me just quickly mention the routing. All of these vocals, it's super simple. They're just being routed to my vocal submix here, and then the submix is routed to my master fader. And aside from that, I just have some send effects for ambience, and that's about it. So again, I just muted all of the effects that are happening on this channel and all the effects that are let me just mute the effects that are happening on a submix as well. So let's listen to this chorus vocal, Absolutely Dry. Let's check it out.
This is the end of the road, I sold it all, time to let this go.
Now, he's a great singer, sings nice and consistently. His level isn't all over the place. I didn't even compress this on the way in. It was recorded completely dry. So all of that nice, consistent sound really comes down to him just belting it out at the same consistent level. But even though it's consistent, I still wanted to compress the vocal so it sits nice and evenly on top of the heavy guitar tracks. because even though they're a poppy melodic band, their production is very heavy. The guitars are very dense, their drums hit super hard, the bass is pounding in the background. So these vocals really had to compete with these other heavy elements within the mix. So those are the vocals recorded into an SM7B with nothing on them at all. So first in my chain, I like to apply a little bit of compression that is not doing anything drastic. Let's see what this compressor is doing. And in this case, I'm using the stock Pro Tools compressor. Again, I know I say this in a lot of my videos, but don't get caught up in the exact plugins that you're using. I use tons of stock plugins. I found throughout the years that it's much more important to know the plugins that you're using than the actual plugins that you're using themselves. Meaning the real value is in knowing how to use your plugins, knowing them inside and out. So let's see what this is doing.
This is the end of the road. I sold it all. Time to.
Yeah, so as you can see, it's just catching some of the peaks, about 6 dB of gain reduction, which is not a lot at all. But I have this first in my chain because I want the vocal to be slightly compressed before it hits my EQ. Here is my EQ. I have a high pass filter happening all the way up to about 133 Hertz. I did this completely by feel. I do not get caught up in numbers. A low shelf that's kind of just reducing all of the lower mids, pulling out a little bit of 7K-ish, pulling out a little bit of 3K, and a little bit of the super duper top that I really don't want because that's where the cymbals live. And let's hear what the EQ is doing to the vocals.
This is the end of the road. I sold it all. Time to let.
Yeah, so as you can hear, this EQ added a lot to the vocal sound. It thinned it out, cleaned it up. It just really will help it sit within the dense, heavy mix. If the vocal is overly low-endy or overly bright, it just won't sit right within the heavy production because it'll be fighting with the bass and it'll be fighting with the cymbals. So the vocal now sits right in its own parking spot, right where it's not conflicting with anything else. So after my EQ, here is the big one. I have a second compressor that's doing the heavy lifting. Now, why would I use two compressors? Well, here's the reason. When you dual compress like this, you end up with a way more transparent result. If I were to use only a single compressor and try to get my results that way, I'll end up with an overly compressed sounding vocal. The reason why this works is because the two compressors work independent of one another. So they're both doing slightly different things, and the resulting effect is that it just sounds way more natural and way more transparent to the listener. So let's hear what the second compressor is doing. Let's check this out.
This is the end of the road. I sold it all.
So this is my heavy-handed pop kind of compressor. Let's see how much gain reduction is happening.
This is the end of the road.
So about 12 dB of consistent gain reduction. So my first compressor here is just catching the peaks. Let's take a look.
This is the end of the road.
Yes, my first compressor is just catching the peaks, and my second compressor is just super consistent. Let's take a look at it again.
This is the end of the road.
So these two compressors working together are giving me the result that I'm after, which is a nice consistent vocal sound that can compete with the heavy guitars. After that, I have a simple de-esser. Let's see what this de-esser is doing.
This is the end of the road. I sold it all. Time to.
Typical stuff. The de-esser is there really just to tame some of the sibilances. Okay, so from there, this vocal is being fed to my vocal submix. Let's see what I have going on here. I have a plugin called Phoenix 2. The Phoenix is pretty much just a saturator. This plugin has been around since the dawn of time. It's just a tape emulator, and it's a great one at that. Now, I am not picky. I will use any distortion plugin. This is just what I pulled up this day. I kind of tweaked it, and it gave me the results I was after. But even the stock Pro Tools distortion plugin, I use all the time as well. So don't get too caught up in the exact plugin that I'm using. But let's see what this plugin is adding to the vocal sound.
This is the end of the road.
So here's the vocal without the tape saturator.
This is the end of the road.
And with the tape saturator.
This is the end of the road.
Extremely subtle. I would not consider this plugin one of my 20%ers. I would consider this plugin to fall into my 80% of mix tweaks, where yes, it adds to the vocal sound, but as you can hear, it's very, very, very subtle. For me, it's just adding a little bit of character, a little bit of analog warmth. But if I were to take it away, it would not ruin the mix. No one would probably even notice. It's there just to add that extra 5%. So after that, I have a second de-esser. Now, the reason why I'm using a secondary de-esser on my actual vocal submix is, let's say when a double kicks in, which I'm gonna get to in a second, because I have some doubles and some harmonies. So because I'm working with the same vocalist, let's say he doubles or triples a word that has a lot of sibilants, this de-esser is here just to catch those frequencies when 2 or 3 tracks of the same frequency happening are combined and over exaggerated. So this is here just to kind of keep them in check. From there, I have some send effects happening. Let's take a look at my send effects. I have one called width, which I'm gonna get into, delay, Q delay, which is a quarter note delay, a mono delay, a slap echo, and one called Vox ambience that just has a delay with a slightly different setting than my main delay plugin. Okay, so on this chorus vocal, let's activate the Vox ambience and see what it's doing.
This is the end of the road, I sold it all. Time to let this go.
Yes, now in solo, that sounds like way too much, but this delay plugin is in sync with the tempo of my song, and my tempo is, let's see, the tempo is 180. So the delay plugin is synced to 180. Now again, in isolation, to me, that sounds like it's way too much, but it doesn't matter because when the track is happening, you don't really notice it. It just adds depth to the vocal without it even being obvious to the listener, which for me, for the most part, is what I'm going after when I'm using delays. I don't want the listener to be conscious of them. I just want them to add depth without it being noticeable. So here's the second send effect on my chorus vocal. I have this thing called width, right? Now let's see what the width is doing.
This is the end of the road, I sold it all. Time to let this go. I'm at the end of my...
Okay, so as I increase that width track, where I had it sitting was where it is in the mix, which is very subtle. But as I increased it just to over exaggerate it, you notice kind of like this weird stereo thing happening to the vocal. That's because for only the chorus vocals, I have some extra processing happening on the sides. And what's happening is a very simple distortion plugin just to add extra character. I have a pitch shifting plugin that's in multi-mono, so each side is independent of one another. The left side I have detuned by 11 cents, and the right side I have pitched up by 14 cents. So what's actually happening is the left and right sides are slightly out of tune with the center vocal. It just makes the chorus stand out from the verse. And after that plugin, I just have some EQ just pulling out a little bit of, 3K and what do we got here? Around, 5K. Just because I felt like when I added that distortion, it was just a little harsh. So I did that just to tame it. This process is not in my 20% of the mix that really makes the big difference. This is more in the 80% that's adding to the 20%, if that makes sense. So this is just a very subtle process, similar to the tape distortion that's happening on my vocal submix. It's there, it adds a little bit of ear candy, but if I were to take it away, it would not hurt the overall production at all. It's just there just to add a little bit of extra spice. Okay, so with all that being said, I'm gonna play the track back once more, and then I'm gonna go over what the other additional vocal tracks are actually doing. Just as a quick refresher, let's hear the overall vocal sound and all of the production that's happening with the vocal tracks. So when I broke down all those processes, that was really happening on the chorus vocal. Luckily, the processing that's happening on every single vocal track is exactly the same in terms of compression and EQ. The only thing that varies is the ambient effects that are happening. Okay, so with that being said, we have some vocals that happen in the bridge, and again, they are mixed in the exact same manner. The only difference is that I'm not utilizing the exact same delay. That crazy delay that you heard in the chorus is not on the actual verse vocal, and the same thing goes with that width plugin, that pitch shifter. That's not happening in the verse/bridge vocal. The bridge vocal features the exact same compression and EQ, but it utilizes a slap echo just to change the feel from the chorus to the bridge or the chorus to the verse or whatever. It just gives it a slightly different feel without overly changing the character of the vocal. So let's see what that ambient effect is sounding like on the bridge vocal. Let's check it out.
Do I have to feel this way? Can I make this stay?
Yes, So on the bridge vocal, I just have a simple slap echo with a delay of 180 milliseconds on the left side and a delay of 220 milliseconds on the right side. It just adds a nice ambience to the vocal that again is not overly obvious to the listener. It just adds depth and feel without it sounding like a cheesy effect or something. But anyway, the other thing that I want to quickly mention is that each of these delays has a roll off happening, so a low pass filter. So on that ambient track that I had playing before, that's rolled off at 6K, and then the slap echo is rolled off at 7K, and my other delays are rolled off at around 4K. Okay, so that's my verse vocal. Aside from my verse vocal, I have these woe tracks where he's just singing woes. There's no lyrics, he's just singing woes in the background. And again, these are mixed in the exact same way as well, but they don't have any delay happening at all on them. So it's just the compression, EQ, and that same secondary compressor. And there's no de-esser because there's no actual sibilance happening on the woe tracks at all. They're not lyrics, they're just woes. And finally, the coolest thing in my opinion about this song are the gang vocals. So let's take a listen to what's happening with these gang vocals. Now, if you notice a slight reverb on the vocals, the cool thing is that this is not artificial reverb. I actually stuck the guys in the hallway and had them sing the parts in the hallway, so that reverb is natural reverb. As a matter of fact, I have a clip recorded from the session that I'm gonna play right now. That's surprisingly loud. Like really loud. Yeah, so it was simple. I just stuck up a condenser mic at the end of the hallway and I had them sing the gang vocals at the other end of the hallway and it turned out great. I didn't even need to use any artificial reverb to get that reverby kind of sound because it was recorded in a natural space that had a lot of natural reverb. Now, as far as processing on the gang vocal track, there is pretty much nothing. Just a high pass filter happening at around 160 hertz. No compression because I wanted those vocals to sound very ambient. If you overcompress gang vocals, they can kind of sound choked out, I've noticed. So I found that if you record them right and the guys are really singing nice and loud, not utilizing compression on gang vocals, I found actually helps them stand out alongside the rest of the mix. So the last thing I want to mention is I do have some ambient effect sends happening on my vocal submix. So if you look here, I have automation happening again on my vocal submix with pretty much two different plugins. I have my main delay here, which is a stereo delay, and I have a quarter note delay, which is in mono, which is very similar, but it's in mono. So I use them for different things. If it's a delay that I want to be more subtle, and that's just time to the music, I'll send it to the mono delay. If I want it to sound more epic and more ambient, I would send it to the stereo delay. In this mix, I used mainly the quarter note delay. If you look here, I only used the stereo delay. You can see it right here on one phrase. The rest of the song, I just used a bunch of the quarter note delay. So you might be wondering why I have my automation happening on my submix instead of the individual tracks. And the reason why is I found it actually saves time. Let's say there's a vocal delay throw that I want on specific words and phrases. I've just found that if I have it on the submix, I don't have to do it individually on the independent tracks. So throughout the chorus, let's take a listen here. If I were to play this chorus vocal, and where you see these lines of automation, I'm pretty much unmuting the send to the delay, and that's where you'll hear the vocal delay kick in. So let's check this out.
This is the end of the road, I sold it all. Time to let this go. I'm at the end of my rope. I'm told that I'm so far from home, but I won't give it up. Disassemble me.
So there you have it. It's a pretty standard mixing technique where you have delays just on specific words and phrases. So in this chorus, not only have that vocal ambience happening throughout the duration of the entire chorus, I have these delay throws happening on specific words and phrases. Okay, so let's listen to everything combined. All the EQ, all the compression, all the ambient stuff that's happening from the chorus through to that bridge, and let's just hear it all together. Let's check it out. So here we go. So there you have it. That's my approach to mixing clean vocals within a heavy production. So I'm curious, how do you approach clean vocals in a metal production? Do you utilize a very simple approach like I do? Do you prefer something that's a little more complex? I'd love to know. Leave a comment in the comment section below and tell me about your approach to mixing clean vocals in a heavy production. If you have found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon in order to be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And do not forget to download my free quick EQ guide that contains all of my EQ settings that I always return to when starting a mix. There is a link below within the video subscription. Till next time, happy mixing.